What's going on, guys? Welcome back. In this video, we are going to get started with how to fetch our notifications from our backend. So this should be pretty straightforward at this point. We went over our backend structure already, and we just need to go and get the data from the correct place or the correct endpoint, right? So I'm just going to jump right into it. First off, guys, we are going to need our current user ID. So let's go ahead and grab that, because we are fetching the notifications for the person we are logged in as, right? So we're going to say else return there. Make sure you delete the comma after UID if you copy and pasted like me. And now we're just going to go into that Firebase location. Here we can say return a blank array if the UID is not there for some reason. And guys, we are going to say let snapshot equal try await Firebase constants dot notifications collection dot document. And we're going to look at the current user ID. We want to fetch notifications for that person. Dot collection user dash notifications dot get documents, right? So guys, really quickly before we move forward, I would like to clean this up a little bit. This like getting to a sub collection. The reason I want to clean it up is because it's really easy to make mistakes here. Like I could have forgot an I in notifications, and this would cause my entire fetch to fail. So I want to add some more functionality to our Firebase constant structure to get to a particular sub collection like this. So I'm going to show you guys how to do that now. So let's go and hop into Firebase constants, and let's say let's create a function to get to this sub collection. We're going to say static let user notification collection. Or sorry, we're going to create a function, guys. And we are going to pass in a UID here. And this is going to return a collection reference, I think. Yes. And we'll see why we need this UID in just a second. So we're just going to return our notifications collection dot document UID dot collection user dash notification. So the reason we need to make this a function, guys, is because we need an input parameter here. We need to know the document path to go down and then get to that particular sub collection, right? So we'll see how we can use this in a second and how it's going to make our code a little bit more error proof. So here I can replace all this with Firebase constants dot user notification collection and just pass in my current UID. Way cleaner, right? And then that avoids us having to spell out that user dash notifications guy like this. And guys, we can go here and replace that as well, right? Just to, like I said, remove the possibility of error there. So we can say user notification collection, and we're going to pass in our current UID. Nice little cleanup there. But anyway, guys, now we have our documents. So now we can just say return, We're going to say return snapshot dot documents dot compact map, open your brackets and say $0 dot data as notification dot self. Okay. And we do need to say try here. Just like that. Perfect. Okay, so now we can fetch our notifications. So guys, now what I want us to do is go over how to actually call our fetch notifications function and how we're going to go about doing that. So we're going to go to our view model. And guys, we are going to inject this view model with an instance or with our notification service. So we're going to do this. We're going to say service, which is a notification service. And here we are going to say private let service be of type notification service. And we're going to say self.service equals service. So let's take a quick pause here. If you guys remember at the end of the last video, I told you we were going to do this service a little differently. So this is what's known as dependency injection, guys. So basically we're saying that this view model has to be initialized with a service, or it has a dependency on a service. In this case, it's this notification service that we have here. So anytime we create this view model, we have to pass in a service like this. And then we are going to use that service, like we see here, to fetch our notifications. So we're going to go here and say, Okay, first off, this needs to be an asynchronous function. And we're going to say do and catch. And we're going to say self.notifications equals service, or try await, sorry, dot fetch notifications. And if we fail, we'll say print debug failed to fetch notifications with error. Error.localized description. Pretty straightforward service stuff. So how is this different from other things we've done? We need to make this a task. Await fetch notifications. Boom. And I'll go over why we add this to the init as well. I know we talked about a different way of doing this with the task modifier. And I've done a lot of research into this stuff, guys, and I'm going to break this down in detail. But first, let's start off with why we are injecting this notification service with, or this notifications view model with the service. So guys, really quick, if we go back to our comments view model, right? We did something kind of similar, but here we are not injecting it as a required input parameter. We're constructing the comment service inside of the comments view model, right? So this makes your code harder to test and harder to add mock services and mock data to. And dependency injection sort of solves that problem. We are not going to go too deep into that. I do want you guys to know that we do a much deeper dive in this stuff in the Swift networking masterclass. So if you guys want to know like real professional high-level architecture pattern for like services and view models like this, which is how things are truly done in the professional world and what you'd be expected to do in things like take-home interviews, make sure you go and take the Swift Networking Masterclass. This is a masterpiece in everything you need to know about networking, unit testing, dependency injection, async await, caching, and all of that good stuff, guys. So that's available at stephancodes.com under the courses section. Make sure you guys go ahead and check that out. We're not going to do too deep a dive into the reasoning behind this stuff. Just know that this is typically how you do things with dependency injection using services and view models, okay? So guys, if we try to build our code right now, you're going to notice that I think we should get an error, right? And that's because we need to pass in a service here. So here we are going to go here and say, we can just create an instance of our notification service here. And just to do a quick touch on what this is, doing here, it's injecting a service, guys. And the reasoning behind this is ideally you could create some sort of protocol-oriented service where you could create like a mock service and an actual service so that you could swap them out when you inject that service into the view model. But like I said, all of that stuff is covered in the networking masterclass, so make sure you guys check that out. So let's see. Now that we have that, we can get our notifications, and we should notice that those are going to be coming back from our back end now. So guys, let me go ahead and run this code. And that should be everything we need to do to fetch our notifications from the back end. The last piece of this puzzle is going to be configure how to fetch our user and post data for those notifications. So guys, I have to make sure that I go and log in as the correct user. So I sent those notifications to Venom. If I log in here and I go here, okay, so we need to make sure that we're actually passing our notifications view into our tab view. So let's see, where is the tab view? It is right here, main tab view. So yeah, replace text notifications with our notifications view and run this bad boy again. And we should get 2 notifications back that are coming from Batman. It's going to say Yuki, I think. Ooh, we have a threading issue. So let's go here and make this class say main actor and run it again. All right, moment of truth. Let's go here. Huh. No notifications. That's interesting. So let's do some debugging to try to figure out why. So I think it's probably an issue with how I spelt this, and you guys probably didn't mess this up. I did. So I said user notification here instead of user notifications, right? So make sure that this spelling matches up exactly with what you have in your database, guys. And that's a clear example as to why it's important to do that stuff correctly and build your code in such a way that it's not as error prone. Okay, so now if we go here, yes, we get them back. That's amazing. So we have 3 notifications, right? One for follow and one for liking one of our posts and commenting on one of our posts. So that is absolutely incredible. What we need to do next, guys, is go over how to fetch the user data and post data if it's there for that particular notification. So let's go back into our view model. And we're going to add a function to our view model to sort of fetch that notification metadata. So I call it metadata because it's like we can see here that all of our notification stuff is there kind of, but like it has associated metadata with it, which is our user info and our post info if it's there. So guys, we have the information we need to fetch the user info and the post info. So we just need to write a function here to go ahead and get that data. So I'll explain why we put this in the view model. You could put this functionality in the view model or the service. We'll go over that towards the end of the video. But this essentially is going to be very similar to what we had to do with our post, guys. So if we go into our feed view model, or actually post service, let me check this out. Fetch feed posts. Yeah. So we kind of did this here, right? Where we fetch the post data, but then we have to go and fetch the user data. So it's going to be pretty similar to that. I'm just going to show you a different way of doing it. Here we did everything in the service. I'm going to show you how you could also do this in the view model and explain why, like I said. So let's make another function and we're going to say update notifications. And I'm just going to make sure that I have the notifications first, and then I'm going to loop through them and fetch the associated metadata. So I'm going to say for notification, or actually I'm going to say for I in 0 up to notifications.count, let notification equal notifications I, and I will explain this again, why we do the for loop this way. And I'm going to say, first off, we need to fetch the user for the notification, right? So I'm going to say, let's make this a var. Then I'm going to say notification.user is equal to try await user service dot shared. I think we have, yeah, dot fetch. Oh man, do we not have a user? Let's go and check out this user service and see what we need. Yeah, so we have this fetch user function. So let's go ahead and call that. We can just say dot fetch user because it's a static function. And we're going to say notification dot notification sender UID. Oh, we need to say async the rows, guys. Perfect. Okay. Next up, we need to check and see if the post exists and fetch the post data associated with that. So I'm going to say if let post ID equals notification.post ID, notification.post equals try await post service dot fetch. Do we not have a function to fetch a post? Let's see. Okay, yeah. So we actually need to add a function to our post service to fetch an individual post, guys. So we're going to say static func fetch post, and it's going to have a post ID associated with it. It's going to say async throws a post object, right? So we just need to go into our database and get the post with this post ID. And this is going to be super simple. We're just going to say let snapshot equal try await Firebase constants dot post collection dot document post ID dot get document. And you guys will notice we have this really convenient function here from Firebase. It's a nice helper. We can get the document as a particular object, right? So I can go here and just say post.self. And I can actually just return this. Pretty simple one-liner, man. Firebase makes that pretty easy for us. Awesome. So that's all we need to do to get a post, right? It just goes to the post collection, goes to that particular post ID, and then it gets the document as that post, as that object. The only thing you need is for this object that you have to conform to the codable protocol, and we're good there. So awesome. Anyway, guys, let's go back to our notifications view model, and we're going to say post service.fetch post with notification.post, or actually, we need to use this guy here from the if let. And then we are going to say notifications I equals this notification. And after we fetch our notifications, we're going to call this guy to update all of them. Okay, so we need to say try, await, update notifications. Okay, so let's just go ahead and run this and see if it works, and then I will explain that function. I'm also going to explain some of the inefficiencies in it and how we can improve that later on in the course. So guys, we're going to go here, and let's actually go, and we need to do one more thing. We need to actually modify our UI to have the associated user and post data. So let's go to our notification cell right here. And here we need to replace this with the username. We need to inject our user into the circular profile image view. So here's how we're going to do that. Let's go ahead and cut this. We're going to say if let user equals notification dot user. We're going to pass that guy. Actually, hold on. I don't think we need to use an if let there. I think we can just go here and say user notification dot user, because I'm pretty sure we made that user property optional. Right? Yep. So that looks good. And then here we're going to say notification dot username. And if it's not there, we'll just do a blank string while it's loading. And here, guys, I'm not sure if we have that timestamp stuff yet. Oh, we do. Nice. Okay. So let's go here and say, let's inject that. Say notification dot timestamp string. It's a beautiful extension we wrote that gives us that timestamp string in the format that we need it. So guys, this is looking pretty solid, man. This is like pretty much all we need to do for our notification metadata. The last thing we would need to do is to check and see if that user that followed us is followed, right? Because if we're following them, we would want it to say that we are following them. And then we would have to implement that follow and unfollow functionality from here as well. But that's going to come later. But check that out, man. That is amazing. Ooh, okay. So we are getting the user picture and the user name back. So that's great, right? But we need to make sure we do the same thing for the post. So here, we're going to replace this with a KF image. So I'm going to say, let's see. So let's do KF image. We need to import Kingfisher up at the top. KF image. And we need to create a URL. So it's going to be a URL, which is a string, and it's going to be notification dot post dot image URL. And we can just make this blank if it's not there. You guys could also use an if let here, but that should be it, man. So that's going to give us back the image for that particular post. We go here, and oh my goodness, that is smooth as hell. Let's go. Right? Oops. Let me get back. Okay. Yeah, guys, so that's the post image that was liked, right? Like this is Venom's post. That's this guy right here. So that's looking really, really good. Let me just go back through into our notifications view model and explain how we are getting this metadata and explain some of the drawbacks behind this method, and also explain like why we put it in the view model versus potentially putting it in the service. So let me start with what we're doing here. So basically, guys, we go and fetch our notifications, right? But it doesn't have all of the data that we need right away. That our backend is unfortunately kind of limited in that way. And I'll explain more about that when in this explanation as well. But basically, we have to use pointers to get the other data that we need. And when I say pointers, I mean like the user ID for the person that sent the notification. And we have to take that user ID and go and get the user's data from the user structure. So let me talk about that a little bit more. So like, for example, we go to this notification and we have the UID of the person that sent it, right? But we don't have all the user data for that person. And some of you guys might be like, yo, well, why don't you just pass up all the user data? Why don't you, like their profile image URL and their username and stuff? And the reason for that is we have edit profile functionality here, right? So the user stuff could change. So we want to have what's known as a single source of truth for the user data, because it is subject to change, right? Like the user could change their profile image, and if we pass all of that data up instead of just the user ID, like if we passed up the user's profile image and their username, we would be limited to what it was at that particular moment in time. If the user edits that information, we would then have to try to go into our backend and find every single place that user exists in the backend, which could be millions, right? And update their data that way. So when an app has edit profile functionality, it makes it so it's a little bit more complicated for you to make things work correctly. So what we have to do is take this pointer of that user ID and go into the user object section and find that particular ID for the user and then fetch the information that way. So this is what's known as our single source of truth, right? Like when the user updates their stuff, everything gets updated here, and we're fetching the information from here, which will always give us the most up-to-date user information. So that's why we have to do it that way. And we have to do the same thing for the post, right? And I think that you probably could just pass up the post image URL because you can't change the post image URL, but it's sort of that same concept, right? Like, and the purpose of this course, guys, is not to get into like complex back-end architecture. The reality is, if you're working at a company or something as an iOS developer, you're not going to be doing any of this back-end stuff. This is mainly for people that are trying to build their own apps by themselves from scratch. But Firebase does have a lot of limitations, and it's not a perfect back-end. It's really easy to use, but there is a lot of functionality that in it that is missing. And like apps like Instagram and TikTok and Threads and stuff, they don't really use Firebase. They have a much more complex back-end that does all of this annoying stuff for you. But unfortunately, because we're working with Firebase and we're not back-end engineers, we have to do this stuff on our own. So what we're doing here with this update notifications function is we're taking those things like the notification sender UID and the post UID, and we're fetching them from the places in the database that we need to, right? So that's what this function is responsible for doing. However, this is not like a great way of doing it using the new async await functionality. And the reason for that is because you guys will notice that, like, let me close this app and launch it again. Instagram tutorial. And pay attention to how this stuff works. You're going to notice stuff sort of loads like one by one. So I'm going to go here and you guys are going to see 1, 2, 3, bam, right? It loads like individually. And that's because of the way we're doing this. And I might show you guys a different way of doing it later on that's more efficient. But basically, it's going to each notification, and then it's fetching the user. But it uses this await keyword, so it pauses execution here. And it waits until that user comes back. And then if a post is there, it goes and fetches the post. But this is all happening synchronously, right? So first off, it's getting to the first notification, and then it's fetching the user. And then only once that is done, then it fetches the post, and then it updates this notification. And then it goes to the next one. And it does the same thing. It fetches the user first. It has to wait till that's done. And then it then goes and says, hey, okay, there's a post ID there. Let me go and fetch the post and wait till that's done. And then I can update the notification. Ideally, what you want to do here is do all of this stuff asynchronously. And you guys could accomplish this and make this a little better using async let. And I'm going to leave that as sort of homework for you guys. I'm going to leave this as is for now. But basically, we did that with the user stats functionality, right? So if you go to the user service, let's see, fetch user stats, where are you? Yes, we use this async let functionality where we don't have to wait for this to come back before we go and get this, It fires all of this stuff off at the same time. And it doesn't care when each individual thing comes back. It just gives the whole thing back to us when it's done. Because let's say this takes 5 seconds, right? And then this takes 1 second and this takes 1 second. We don't want to wait 5 seconds before these two things go and get fetched, because then we have a total of a 7-second wait time. Whereas if this takes 5 seconds, but we fire all of these things off simultaneously, we don't have to wait for this one to complete before the other two do, right? So ultimately, the worst case scenario for this to complete would be the slowest thing, which in this case was 5 seconds, right? So that's an improvement you could make, but the async await stuff has an even better way of doing this, where you can make all of these tasks asynchronous and fire off asynchronously, where you don't have to go through and loop through each notification. So even if you use the async let stuff, you're still fetching the notification metadata one by one. What you want to do is say there's a list of 20 notifications. You don't want to say fetch the first one and then the second and then the third and then the fourth and then the fifth, right? You want to fire off all of those things or all of those data or API calls at the same time, right? To do it asynchronously. That way you're not just going one by one by one by one by one. Even if you have the async let stuff within the for loop, it's only async performing the tasks for that particular notification, asynchronously. Like if I'm at notification 1, it's going to fetch the user and the post asynchronously, but it's not going to start fetching notification 2 metadata until notification 1 metadata is fetched. So those are just some drawbacks here, guys. But the nice thing is we do fetch and display the notifications before we go and do this stuff, right? So we can see some stuff showing up, and you guys can add like placeholder data while that stuff is loading. Like you could make this just like a gray image, or this just like the blank person image. And that way something is showing up on the screen, and we're not waiting for all of that stuff to come back before we ultimately display information on the screen to the user. And that's a big thing with apps like this, right? Like latency time, or how long it takes to display an initial set of data on the screen. So that is a benefit of this architecture. And I know I'm ranting a little bit here, guys, but this stuff is important to understand and important to know as a developer, especially at a high level, and especially if you're trying to build high quality apps. So the last thing I want to talk about is why we put this stuff inside of the notifications view model and not the notifications service. So we could have put that notification like metadata function inside of the service, but basically then it would be pretty annoying to make it have that current functionality that we have right now, where it displays the notification data first and then goes and fetches the metadata. So if we go back to the feed view model, where is that? Feed cell view model? No, sorry, post service, I think it is. Right, fetch feed posts. Like here, that's what we're doing, right? Like we have to fetch the post and the user object, but what's happening is we're not displaying posts until we go and fetch the user, right? So that's sort of the drawback of doing everything inside of the service. You could like return the post and then update the posts from the service, but then you have to use like Combine and a bunch of publishers to do that. And I've tried that and it's a little messy. The benefit of this is all of the data just displays at the same time, right? It takes a little bit longer, but the important concept to understand here is like the difference between the two things, right? So if we were to do it the way we just did it in the notifications, we could fetch all the post data and display like the image and the caption of the post, and then maybe a half a second later display the user info associated with the post. But right now we're fetching the post data, and then we are fetching the user data, and then we are displaying the information. So it's more of a synchronous process, and it's really up to you guys which way you prefer. And the reason I brought up how this would be in an actual like professional environment is most of the time you guys wouldn't have to do this stuff. The backend would just give you everything you need right away. And that's the benefit of more like complex backends that, like maybe MongoDB or AWS and stuff. And when you have an actual backend engineer that knows how to do this stuff well, we wouldn't have to go, or typically you wouldn't have to fetch post data and then fetch user data. And like with the notifications, this gets pretty messy, right? Because like we have to fetch like user data and then post data. And then we also need to know if the user's followed or not. That's an additional step we haven't even done. So when there's a lot of metadata associated with a single object, it is annoying to have to go and execute multiple API calls to get all of that data, right? But typically in the professional world, your backend would just give you all of that stuff right away. So you just get all the data that you need right away, and then you can just use all of that data to render everything as you see fit, or not as you see fit, just right away. And you don't have to go into the back end and fetch all the other stuff separately. But in this case, that's what we got to do because that's what we're sort of limited to with Firebase, right? But anyway, guys, I know that I just ranted like a mofo, but all of that stuff is pretty important to understand. And my goal is to help you guys get to the next level of engineering here with these courses. And that's stuff that you got to think about as a high-level senior engineer, which is where I'm trying to get you guys. So that's going to wrap it up for this video, guys. Hope that explanation made sense and that you guys are enjoying the course so far. In the next one, we are going to go over how to implement like navigation for these notifications and how to delete them as well. So get excited for that. We will see you there. Peace.